hate you, boy. Yeah. I hate you. I hate you, fofo.
The streets promise ultimate status and loyalty, but the reality of that world often comes with a brutal, unforgiving ceiling. We're examining the unfiltered rise and fall of 51 Melly, a figure who reset the temperature of the south side of Chicago and whose story, as this detailed account shows, reveals a tragic cycle that even the most feared couldn't escape.
To really understand Melly, you have to look at the chaotic hand he was dealt from birth. Born Yarmel Devontae Williams in November 1991, he was the oldest of three, growing up alongside his brother DeAndre, known as 051 Wu. Their mother, Angie, later had Wu with Jerome Golden, known as Fido, a notorious figure from the Black disciple hierarchy, who was ultimately imprisoned for life. This meant Fido was Melly's stepfather, but Wu's biological father, tying both brothers directly to the streets from day one.
So their lives were essentially predetermined, steeped in that environment from the very beginning. They started in the Met Buildings, a known Black disciple stronghold, before moving into the heart of 600 territory. What specifically pushed Melly from being just a high school kid into the life of a stepper?
The turning point came in September 2008. Melly's closest friend, 051 Zico, was cornered on 51st and King Drive and killed by a rival set. That sudden loss took a regular high school kid and thrust him into darkness, triggering a surge of retaliation across the city that, quote, permanently reset the temperature of the South Side, end quote. When their mother, Angie, later passed away, the last anchor holding the family together was gone, leaving Melly and Wu with zero boundaries.
So Zico's death was the catalyst, marking Melly's official entry into that role. What was his first significant act that cemented his reputation?
In February 2012, the conflict with the 600 set intensified. On a freezing night, a prominent 600 enforcer named Shaq was caught off guard on the south side. A vehicle pulled up, and attackers unleashed a high volume of gunfire. Shaq collapsed, and the streets immediately attributed this execution to Melly, marking it as a key moment in his early street history.
This gave him immediate rank, propelling him to target even higher-tier rivals. That hunger for dominance seems to have led directly to one of the most impactful events mentioned in the text, the killing of Lil Nusky.
Absolutely. On May 25, 2014, at a busy shopping center in Chatham, MacArthur Swindle, known as Lil Nusky or Nunu, Lil Durk's cousin and a rising star for OTF, was sitting in a parked car. Melly approached, raised a weapon, and fired a relentless stream of high-caliber rounds through the window, striking Nusky. Nusky instinctively pressed the gas, crashing into a storefront, and died at the wheel. The streets immediately identified Melly as the primary shooter, fundamentally changing the rules of the ongoing conflict.
That's a level of ruthlessness that immediately made him the most hunted person in the city. How did he respond to that increased pressure and paranoia?
His mindset was to strike first and, crucially, to cut off his enemy's financial system. This led to the March 2015 incident at a South Side restaurant. Uchenna Agina, or Chino Dalla, OTF's official manager, was in a vehicle on a business call. Attackers approached, and a hail of gunfire struck Chino multiple times in the chest. Melly personally handled this, believing he was severing the management lines funding the rival set's operation.
So he's not just targeting other steppers, but the financial infrastructure, showing a strategic, albeit brutal, approach. But what about when he himself became a target?
Just 2 months later, in May 2015, the war became deeply personal. Members of THF46 caught Melly and 051 Arrow on 51st Street. A 15-year-old shooter, THF Rahim, opened fire, grazing Melly in the head, while Arrow sustained heavy injuries. Both survived. Melly spent 12 days in the hospital, quote, plotting his move, end quote. Days after his release, he was back on the pavement. On May 24th, Rahim was cornered in an alley on Woodlawn and gunned down. This created intense friction because Rahim was the cousin of FBG Duck, a leader of STL. Even though Duck understood the street code, it made everyone paranoid about Melly.
That's a direct example of the cycle of retaliation he perpetuated, but it also started to sow distrust, even among allies. What happened when another close associate was lost?
The block's wars escalated with the loss of 51 Young Money's bankroll, known as Bankroll Q, in 2016. He was a loved figure in the set. At a crowded house party, far from his usual territory, a fight broke out with members of the Motown Alliance, specifically Folly World and GGE. Shots were fired and Bankroll Q was killed. The streets quickly identified Lil Del from Folly Boys and TY from GGE as the main figures responsible. This loss, quote, snapped the final chain of restraint on Melly, end quote. He went scorched earth on the Motown pipeline.
So this wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a clear, immediate message, dismantling the entire rival structure. How did he follow through on that?
He acted immediately. He tracked Lil Del, the leader of the Folly Boys, to his home base on 49th and Damon and deployed heavy weapons at close range. Hitting the face of Folly World on his own ground proved his willingness to avenge Bankroll Q. He then closed the loop 2 years later, on August 19, 2018. Tyrone Marshall, 2i from GGE, was walking through Bronzeville when a vehicle cut him off. Attackers used high-caliber weapons, striking TY multiple times, and the streets permanently assigned that to Melly, solidifying his reputation as the gravedigger.
The sheer relentlessness is striking, but the text also mentions the heavy psychological toll of this constant warfare, leading to internal fractures. This is where paranoia starts to eat away at his own circle, right?
Exactly. This deep-seated paranoia triggered a massive internal fracture at an outdoor candlelight vigil for Poppy, a respected figure from Taekwon World. Melly was standing next to FBG Duck when Can't Get Right, a Taekwon World shooter, subtly disrespected the 051 Young Money sign directly in Melly's vision. The cameras caught it. Melly just smirked, seemingly unbothered, but that single moment dissolved years of loyalty as, quote, dropping a man's set sign right in his vision at a candlelight vigil is an ultimate declaration of war, end quote.
That's a powerful act of defiance, essentially testing the city's most feared stepper in front of everyone. What were the consequences of that public disrespect?
That moment set up the grim events of June 15, 2018. Can't Get Right was outside a convenience store on East 63rd Street. Suddenly, two masked figures emerged from an alley, unleashing a devastating stream of rounds. Bullets shattered windows and hit Can't Get Right in the chest, killing him and an innocent bystander. While rivals claimed it was retaliation, alternative street accounts suggest a darker, backdoor plot that Melly either orchestrated or was one of the masked shooters, cleaning up the ultimate sign of disrespect to his set.
So the paranoia was so deep that he was potentially targeting those within his own alliance. This kind of internal conflict must have had significant financial strain as well.
It did. By late 2018, Melly's circle was financially drained and desperate. His brother, 051 Wu, was arrested on a heavy weapons charge, and Melly desperately needed bond cash. This pressure led to the infamous Drexel setup. Melly discovered a $12,000 bounty on an associate named Dre, or Lord. Finding a robbery, Melly lured Dre into a vehicle, drove him to Drexel Boulevard, and executed him in a dark gangway to claim the bounty. Unsealed jailhouse recordings later captured Melly and Wu discussing this plot in codes.
Executing an associate for bounty money speaks volumes about the complete disregard for loyalty at that point. What other internal betrayals cemented this fracture?
On January 3, 2019, Yarrow City legend Motor and his associate Side were at a gas station when their car was boxed in, and gunmen unleashed a brutal hail of gunfire, killing both. While initially blamed on outside sets, unsealed discovery paperwork later identified Melly as the primary shooter. This hit triggered absolute paranoia because a young mother deeply tapped into their circle, Ambry Collins, knew the mechanics of it. On January 26, 2019, Ambry was lured to an alleyway in Roseland and ruthlessly executed to keep her quiet.
This string of internal betrayals, eliminating anyone who knew too much or showed disrespect, clearly set the stage for his own end. How did Melly's run on the pavement ultimately conclude?
The exact sequence of these betrayals planted the seeds for his downfall. On September 1, 2019, Melly walked into a crowded late-night house party on St. Lawrence Avenue, likely believing his reputation would protect him. But at 2:51 a.m., Nate, 007 from Taekwon World, stepped out of the crowd and unleashed a fatal stream of gunfire into Melly. This was in direct retaliation for his fallen brothers and sisters, closing out the gravedigger's run on the pavement.
It's a stark reminder that no matter how much status one achieves, The system of the streets, and especially internal paranoia, proves inescapable. The text makes it clear that even his brother, Wu, couldn't break free from this cycle.
That's the ultimate tragedy. Years later, in December 2025, his brother 051 Wu, who was actively trying to change his path and walk away from the streets, was also gunned down. This happened after a celebration party for the release of his father, Fido, who had once faced life in prison. The account concludes that true rank isn't found in a street resume, but in breaking the cycle before it claims you and your entire family.
It's a powerful and somber lesson. If this discussion resonated with you, please consider sharing this episode with someone you think would benefit from hearing it.
Ain't no pass, we on your ass, don't get caught up with